One of the most notable things we've seen so far in the new Shadow Generations gameplay is the Biolizard boss fight. Not only is the spectacle of this thing massive, but it also genuinely looks like a fun and challenging boss fight. And since this fight served as a good way to cap off the Space Colony Arc Zone, because it also takes place on the Arc, that got me thinking, what other boss fights could they add that reference Shadow's past in some way? And I have a few predictions based on the levels that are already confirmed for the game. If you haven't already noticed, the levels in Shadow Generations are all ripped from games that Shadow was playable in. There's a level from Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, and Sonic 06, with the main villain of the game being from Shadow the Hedgehog. What if we looked at the zones we already have confirmed and discussed some boss fights that could appear in them? But before we get into that, we gotta ask ourselves, how many bosses will be present in this game? Well, in an ideal world, we would have one boss per zone. Is this likely? Yes and no. I think there are going to be a total of 4 to 5 zones in the game, not including that DLC zone that's promised later. One zone for each game that Shadow appears in, one from SA2, one from Heroes, one from Shadow 05, and one from 06. Now they could totally take more than one zone from each of these games, and we will discuss that possibility later in the video, but for now, let's just take a look at each game one by one. We can pretty much knock off 2 of these boss fights already. The Biolizard and Black Doom are already confirmed boss fights. As a representation of Shadow's story in SA2, I think the Biolizard makes a ton of sense. This thing was the original Ultimate Life Form, and it played a huge role in the climax of SA2 and Shadow's creation in general, so it would make perfect sense for Black Doom to have Shadow fight this thing again. Black Doom is also confirmed to be a boss fight, even though we don't know what level in the game will be based on Shadow the Hedgehog yet. I also think Devil Doom would serve as the perfect final boss for the game. I'm not entirely sure if we'll see Super Shadow make a return for this final fight, or maybe a new form that involves his wings, but regardless of what they decide to do there, I think it would make perfect sense to base this final boss on the Titan fights of Frontiers. They're already taking a lot of inspiration from Frontiers with the open zone hub world and the control mapping, so it would just make perfect sense for the final boss of the game to evolve the Titan fights from Frontiers. And who knows, they could even get Kellen Quinn back to do a remix of I Am All of Me. That would go so hard. Alright, moving on to Heroes. I think there are 2 possibilities. The obvious choice is Neo Metal Sonic, but that honestly wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if you think about it. Shadow only interacts with Neo Metal one time throughout the entirety of the game, and Metal has nothing to do with his backstory, so instead, let's see what we can gather from the Heroes level featured in Shadow Generations, Rail Canyon / Bullet Station. In this level, Shadow originally found a broken down Shadow android robot, and this was a crucial moment in the story in regards to Shadow's identity of whether he was the original Shadow or not. That would be a perfect plot point to include in Shadow Generations. So what if, after the Rail Canyon level, Shadow goes up against a clone of himself? I think that would be pretty cool. It would represent a point in time where Shadow was questioning whether or not he was the true Ultimate Life Form, and that just seems like the perfect thing for Black Doom to manipulate. Next up, we have Sonic 06. Y'all already know where I'm going with this one. The stage taken from Sonic 06 is Kingdom Valley. And who does Shadow first encounter in Kingdom Valley? Mephiles the Dark, who in my opinion is one of, if not the best villain in the Sonic series. This guy has so much significance in Shadow's backstory, as he metaphorically and literally is Shadow's shadow. It would make perfect sense for Mephiles to return in this game, and since Kingdom Valley is already confirmed to be in the game, it would just make perfect sense. As for the fight itself, I think it would be cool for the first phase of the fight to be against Mephiles' first form, and the second fight to be against his purple crystal form. And I think this fight in particular would benefit greatly from the cool QuickTime events and cutscenes that the Biolizard fight featured. That would be so badass. But yeah, out of every boss fight talked about in this video, I think Mephiles is the most likely to be included. Seriously, if they are only going to put 3 bosses in this game, then Mephiles will be one of them if you ask me. But other than that, I guess Silver could be one of the fights. Wouldn't make much sense story-wise, but hey, if they recreate the cutscene with Shadow's roundhouse kick, I would be satisfied. But let's entertain the idea that there could be more than one boss fight per game. Well, I think it would be cool for one of the later game fights to be against none other than Sonic. Listen, this would be the perfect way to connect Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations. It is already confirmed that Shadow Generations takes place at the same time as Sonic Generations, so it would just make sense for Sonic to make an appearance in this new campaign because there's a Shadow fight in the base game. Now, will it be the same fight as the one in Generations? I honestly hope not, but a fight based on the one in SA2 in Green Forest / White Jungle would be awesome. But yeah, those are my predictions for some of the bosses that could make an appearance in Shadow Generations. I hope you all are enjoying this Sonic X Shadow Generations content because I already have another video I want to make about this game after I finish this one. And don't worry, I'm still working on my usual video essay content as well that's not Shadow Generations related, so stay tuned for that stuff as well. But that's all for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.